His mistress arrived at the ball. The Duke walked past her and knelt before the Wallflower. The Harrington ball represented everything Iris Pemberton had learned to endure with grace and quiet resignation. 500 candles blazed in crystal chandeliers above her head, casting their golden light upon silk gowns and glittering jewels, upon perfectly coiffed hair and practiced smiles, upon a world that had long since decided she did not quite belong within its charmed circle. From her position beside a particularly robust arrangement of potted palms, Iris observed it all with the keen eye of one who had spent 7 seasons perfecting the art of invisibility. "You could at least remove those dreadful spectacles," her mother had hissed, before abandoning her to the palms. "How do you expect anyone to notice you when you insist on looking like a governess?" Iris had not bothered to explain that she expected no one to notice her, spectacles or not. That particular battle had been fought and lost years ago, somewhere between her 2nd season and her 3rd, when it became apparent that her elder sisters had claimed all the family's beauty and left nothing but sharp features and unfortunate colouring for the youngest daughter. Eleanor had married a marquis. Catherine had secured an earl. Iris had secured only a growing collection of manuscripts hidden beneath her bed and a reputation as the Pemberton Wallflower. She adjusted her spectacles now, the better to observe Lady Ashworth's gown, which featured an alarming number of silk roses clustered at the bodice. The effect was less garden party than aggressive shrubbery. Iris filed the detail away for later use, already composing the sentence in her mind. The Countess had adorned herself with sufficient roses to supply a modest funeral, though whether she intended to bury her rivals or her own dignity remained unclear. Her publisher would strike the line, of course. Mr. Hartwell struck all her best lines, claiming that readers of Gothic romance preferred their prose less astringent. But Iris wrote them anyway, small private rebellions against a world that found her wanting. "Iris, dear, you simply must circulate." Her sister Catherine materialized beside the palms, perfectly beautiful in pale blue silk, her expression caught between exasperation and pity. "Standing in corners will not secure you a husband." "I was not aware I was still in pursuit of one," Iris replied mildly. "I rather thought we had all agreed that particular hunt had concluded unsuccessfully." Catherine's lovely face tightened. "You are only 24. There is still time." "For what? To pretend I am something other than what I am?" Iris kept her voice gentle, knowing that Catherine's concern, however misguided, came from genuine affection. "I am content, Catherine. Truly. Some of us are simply not meant for marriage." This was not entirely true. Iris was not content. She was resigned, which was a different thing entirely. But resignation was easier to maintain when one did not speak of it, when one simply accepted the quiet corner and the potted palms and the endless parade of seasons in which nothing changed. Catherine opened her mouth to argue further, but a ripple of excitement swept through the ballroom, heads turning toward the entrance like flowers following the sun. "Oh," Catherine breathed, "Lady Vane has arrived." Iris followed her sister's gaze and felt her novelist's instincts sharpen with interest. Lady Portia Vane swept into the Harrington ball like a queen claiming conquered territory. She was, Iris acknowledged objectively, extraordinarily beautiful, the kind of beauty that announced itself with trumpets, that commanded attention and brooked no competition. Her gown was midnight blue silk, cut daringly low across a magnificent bosom, and sapphires glittered at her throat and wrists. Her hair was black as a raven's wing, elaborately styled, her face a perfect oval, with features so symmetrical they seemed almost unreal. But it was not Lady Vane's beauty that drew every eye and whispered conversation. It was her position. "The Duke's mistress," Catherine murmured, unconsciously moving closer to Iris, as though proximity to scandal were contagious. "Brazen of her to attend when everyone knows she shares his bed." "Does everyone know?" Iris asked, genuinely curious. Or does everyone merely assume? Catherine gave her the look reserved for Iris's more peculiar observations. 3 years she has been his companion. He escorts her to the opera. He has been seen leaving her townhouse at dawn. What else would anyone assume? Iris had no answer to this, but she tucked the question away regardless. Her novels dealt in assumptions and their consequences, in the gap between what society believed and what was true. Lady Vane was precisely the sort of character who would ornament a Gothic tale, the beautiful villainess, perhaps, or the tragic fallen woman. Either way, she was worth watching. And then the whispers changed tenor, rising in pitch, and Iris understood that the true spectacle of the evening had only just begun. The Duke of Blackmore stood in the entrance to the ballroom. He was not what Iris had expected. She had heard him described so often, the Ice Duke, cold as a winter grave, heartless as a marble statue that she had imagined someone colourless, someone washed pale by his own reputation. Instead, Sebastian Ashworth was vividly present, tall and commanding, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples, in a way that should have aged him, but instead lent him an air of distinction that mere youth could never match. His evening clothes were immaculate, his bearing aristocratic, but it was his face that arrested her attention. He was beautiful in the way of fallen angels, all sharp planes and dangerous shadows. High cheekbones, a jaw that spoke of stubbornness and authority, a mouth that might have been sensual had it not been set in such severe lines. And his eyes, even from across the ballroom, Iris could see that his eyes were grey, the cold grey of winter skies, and that they revealed absolutely nothing of the man behind them. Here is a man who has built walls, she thought, and dares anyone to breach them. Lady Vane was already moving toward him, her midnight silk flowing behind her like dark water, her beautiful face alight with possessive triumph. The crowd parted for her, eager witnesses to the reunion of London's most infamous couple. Iris watched with the same detached fascination she brought to all social theatre, waiting to see how the Duke would greet his mistress, what small gestures would pass between them, what secrets their interaction might reveal. But Sebastian Ashworth did not pause for Lady Vane. He did not acknowledge her presence. He walked directly past her, his gaze fixed on something across the ballroom, and Lady Vane's lovely face froze in an expression of shock that Iris suspected would fuel gossip for months. The Duke kept walking, past the dancing couples, past the clusters of matrons with their marriage-minded daughters, past the young bucks lounging with studied nonchalance, directly toward the potted palms, directly toward Iris. She had approximately 3 seconds to wonder if perhaps he sought something behind her, a door, perhaps an escape from the spectacle he had just created before the Duke of Blackmore stopped 2 feet in front of her, met her honey-brown eyes through her unfashionable spectacles, and sank to one knee on the polished marble floor. The ballroom fell utterly silent. "Miss Pemberton," the Duke said, his voice low and clear, carrying just far enough for the nearby witnesses to hear. "Would you do me the honour of the first dance?" Iris could not speak, could not move, could barely breathe. Behind the Duke, she could see 500 shocked faces. Her mother had gone white as her pearls. Catherine appeared to be mouthing something, possibly a prayer. And Lady Vane. Lady Vane looked as though she had swallowed broken glass and was too proud to spit it out. "Miss Pemberton," the Duke prompted, still kneeling, still holding her gaze. "Your answer?" "If you please." This is a dream, Iris thought wildly. A fever dream. Or perhaps I have finally succumbed to novel-writing madness and am even now being carted off to Bedlam. But her hand, operating independently of her stunned mind, extended toward him. "Yes," she heard herself say, "that is I accept." The Duke rose with fluid grace and took her gloved hand in his. His fingers were warm even through the layers of silk and kidskin, and something odd happened in Iris's chest, something fluttering and alarming that she firmly suppressed. She was not some green girl to be undone by a handsome face. There was something wrong here, something she did not understand, and she would not be distracted by grey eyes and elegant hands. He led her onto the dance floor, and the orchestra, recovering from their collective shock, struck up a waltz. "You are wondering why," he said, as he placed one hand at her waist and took her fingers in his other. "Among other things," Iris managed, grateful that her voice emerged steadier than she felt, "such as whether you are drunk, mad, or operating on some species of wager." Something flickered in those grey eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or something darker. "None of those, Miss Pemberton." "Then enlighten me, Your Grace, for I confess myself entirely at sea." They moved through the opening figures of the waltz, and Iris was dimly aware that they danced well together, that his lead was confident without being overbearing, that her body responded to his guidance as though they had practiced this very dance 100 times before. Surrounding them, other couples had joined the floor, but the attention of the entire ballroom remained fixed on the Duke and the Wallflower he had inexplicably chosen. "You are not what I expected," the Duke said. "No one expects wallflowers. That is rather the point of us." His hand tightened almost imperceptibly at her waist. "You hide behind self-deprecation." "Why?" "I do not hide," Iris said, and then, because she was nothing if not honest with herself, "or if I do, it is only because hiding is safer than being seen." "Seen as what?" "As wanting things I cannot have, as dreaming of passion and adventure when my lot is potted palms and resignation, as a woman whose heart is far too hungry for the narrow life society has assigned her." "As presumptuous," she said instead. "It would not do for a wallflower to assume she deserved the same attention as the Lady Vanes of the world." The Duke's expression did not change, but something shifted in the quality of his attention. "You observed my entrance." "Everyone observed your entrance, Your Grace. It was rather dramatic." "And what conclusions did you draw?" Iris considered her answer carefully. This conversation was a maze, and she sensed that wrong turns would have consequences. "I concluded that you wished to make a public statement. What statement and why I cannot guess, but I am quite certain that I am merely the instrument of your message, not its intended recipient." The music swelled around them. The Duke guided her through a turn with impeccable precision. "You are perceptive," he said finally. "More perceptive than most. I have had a great deal of practice in observation. When one is invisible, one sees a great deal." "And what do you see when you look at me, Miss Pemberton?" It was a dangerous question, and Iris knew she should deflect it with some commonplace about his reputation or his title. But the strange intensity of this encounter had shaken loose her usual caution, and she found herself answering honestly. "I see a man who has armored himself against the world. I see walls built high and thick and defended fiercely. I see—" She hesitated, then continued, drawn on by something in his grey eyes that looked almost like hunger. "I see someone who is tired of his own armour, but has forgotten how to remove it." The Duke missed a step. It was infinitesimal, the smallest faltering, but Iris felt it and knew she had struck some hidden mark. For a moment his mask slipped, and she glimpsed something raw beneath pain, perhaps, or loneliness, or the peculiar desperation of a man who has forgotten how to want things. Then the mask returned, smoother and colder than before. "The dance is ending," he said. "I find I have more to discuss with you, Miss Pemberton. Will you walk with me in the portrait gallery?" "Without a chaperone? The scandal would be—" "There has already been scandal enough tonight. A few more minutes in my company will change nothing." His grey eyes held hers. "Unless you are afraid." Iris should have refused. Every rule of propriety, every instinct for self-preservation, Every lesson she had learned in 7 seasons told her to return to her potted palms and wait for this inexplicable evening to fade into memory. "I am not afraid of you, Your Grace," she said. "Lead on." The portrait gallery was dim and cool, lit only by a few scattered candles that threw dancing shadows across the painted faces of long-dead Harringtons. Iris could hear the distant strains of music, the muffled roar of conversation, but here in this hushed corridor, they might have been alone in the world. The Duke stopped before a portrait of some bewigged ancestor, but his attention was not on the painting. He turned to face her, and in the candlelight, his beautiful, severe face seemed almost vulnerable. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "Several, I should think. I am not accustomed to explaining myself." "Then this will be a novel experience for both of us. I am not accustomed to being publicly singled out by notorious dukes. We shall muddle through together." His lips twitched, not quite a smile, but the suggestion of one. "You have a sharp tongue, Miss Pemberton." "I have a sharp mind, Your Grace. The tongue merely follows." He was silent for a long moment, and Iris had the sense that he was choosing his words with unusual care. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher, stripped of its aristocratic polish. "3 months ago, I discovered that my man of business had been embezzling from my estates for years. The losses were significant, but recoverable. What was not recoverable was the reason for his betrayal." The Duke's jaw tightened. He had gambling debts. Creditors were threatening his family. In desperation, he made a devil's bargain with a consortium of men who now hold evidence that could ruin him and, by extension, damage my reputation and my estates. Iris frowned. "I do not understand what this has to do with—" "The consortium's leader," the Duke continued, as though she had not spoken, "is a man named Victor Blackwell. He is wealthy, well-connected, and utterly without scruple. He has made it clear that he intends to use his leverage to destroy me not financially, but socially. He believes I wronged him years ago, and he has nursed that grievance into an obsession." "What wrong does he believe you committed?" The Duke's eyes met hers. "I refused to marry his sister." The pieces began to arrange themselves in Iris's mind. "Lady Vane," she said slowly. She was not always Lady Vane. Portia Blackwell, before she married Lord Vane. Victor's younger sister. The Duke's voice was flat. "I was young and foolish enough to engage in a brief flirtation with her. She took it more seriously than I intended. When I made clear that I had no intention of offering marriage, she married Lord Vane instead, a loveless match that ended when he died and left her wealthy but bitter. Victor blames me for her unhappiness." "And your arrangement with her? The one all of London believes to be a convenient fiction. Portia wanted access to society at the highest levels. I wanted protection from matchmaking mothers and the constant pressure to remarry. We agreed to present ourselves as attached. Nothing more." Iris absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. "But something has changed. Victor has decided that fiction is no longer sufficient. He has demanded that I actually marry Portia, make her a duchess in truth, give her the title and position she believes I owed her from the beginning." The Duke's hands clenched at his sides. "If I refuse, he will release the evidence against my man of business and manufacture additional scandals. He has the resources and the connections to make my life difficult." "And so you have decided to marry someone else instead? Someone who is not his sister?" Iris's voice was calm, but her heart was pounding. "Someone who cannot be refused once the engagement is announced. Someone whose position would be so unexpected, so dramatic, that any attempt to disrupt the match would seem like sour grapes rather than legitimate objection." "Someone invisible," Iris said quietly. Someone no one would suspect you of genuinely wanting. Someone whose sudden elevation would be attributed to whim or madness rather than strategy. The Duke did not deny it. "You chose me," Iris continued, "because I am the most unlikely candidate imaginable. Because no one will believe you actually desire me, and therefore no one will believe that removing me would solve Victor Blackwell's problem. If you had chosen a diamond of the first water, he might convince society that you were being coerced. But a wallflower? Who would bother to coerce a duke into marrying a wallflower? You understand the strategy. I understand that I am being used as a chess piece in a game I did not agree to play." Iris's voice sharpened. "You humiliated Lady Vane publicly. You singled me out from 500 guests. You knelt before me as though I were some prize you had sought, rather than a convenient shield against your enemies. Do you have any notion of what you have done to my reputation? I have made you the most talked-about woman in London. I did not wish to be talked about. I wished to be left alone with my potted palms and my—" She stopped herself before she could mention her manuscripts. "With my quiet life. You have destroyed that. I have offered you something better. You have offered me nothing. You have taken—" Iris pressed her hands together to stop them from trembling. "What happens now, Your Grace? Do you expect me to meekly agree to this charade? To play the besotted wallflower while you use me to thwart your enemies?" The Duke was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, almost uncertain. "I am offering you marriage, Miss Pemberton. A real marriage, not a charade." Iris stared at him. "I need a wife," he continued. "Not merely the pretense of an engagement, but an actual duchess. Victor will not be satisfied with anything less, and frankly, neither will I. I am 32 with no heir. My line will die with me if I do not produce children. I had resigned myself to a cold match with some suitable candidate, a woman who would tolerate me in exchange for my title and wealth. But then I began to observe you. Observe me? In ballrooms, at musicales, in the corners where you think no one notices you." The Duke's grey eyes held hers. "I noticed you, Miss Pemberton. I noticed that you watch everything with those sharp eyes behind your spectacles. I noticed that you seem to be composing something in your head, your lips moving silently as though you are writing sentences no one else can see. I noticed that you are kind to the servants and cutting to the boors, and utterly indifferent to the opinions of those who dismiss you. I noticed—" He stopped himself. "I noticed that you are not what you pretend to be." Iris's throat was tight. "And what do I pretend to be?" "Ordinary, forgettable, content with invisibility." The Duke took a step closer. "You are none of those things. You are extraordinary, Miss Pemberton, and you are wasted on potted palms." No one had ever called her extraordinary. No one had ever suggested that her invisibility was a waste rather than an appropriate response to her limitations. No one had ever looked at her the way the Duke of Blackmore was looking at her now, as though he saw through all her careful camouflage to the hungry, restless woman beneath. "You are trying to manipulate me," she whispered. "I am trying to be honest with you. A novel experience, I assure you." His mouth curved in something that was almost a smile. "I am offering you a bargain, Miss Pemberton. Marry me. Become my Duchess. In exchange, I will provide you with security, position, and complete freedom to pursue whatever interests occupy that formidable mind of yours. I will make no demands on your heart. I will expect nothing from you but discretion and the eventual production of an heir. We will live as polite strangers who happen to share a name and a home." "And what of love?" The question escaped before Iris could stop it, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. "What of affection, of partnership, of— I am not capable of love." The Duke's voice was flat, final. That capacity was destroyed in me long ago. I will not pretend otherwise, and I will not promise you something I cannot provide. But I can offer you honesty, Miss Pemberton. I can offer you respect. I can offer you a life far larger than the one you currently inhabit." Iris turned away from him, pressing her fingers to her temples. This was madness. This was the plot of one of her own novels. The sort of impossible scenario she invented for heroines braver and more beautiful than herself. Dukes did not propose to wallflowers. Dukes certainly did not kneel before them in ballrooms and offer marriage as though it were a business arrangement. And yet, she thought of her family's strained finances, carefully hidden behind a facade of respectability. She thought of the dwindling funds that had been set aside for her dowry, quietly redirected to pay her brother's gambling debts. She thought of the future that awaited her years as a dependent spinster, living on the charity of her married sisters, watching her small freedoms erode until there was nothing left but duty and disappointment. She thought of her novels, her secret passion, the manuscripts that had to be hidden, and the pseudonym that protected her from scandal. She thought of what it might mean to have resources, independence, a husband who expected nothing from her heart and would therefore have no power over it. She thought of how it had felt to dance in the Duke's arms, to be seen by those grey eyes, to be called extraordinary by a man who had no reason to flatter her. "If I refuse," she said slowly, "what happens to me? Society has seen you kneel before me. They have seen us waltz. They have seen us disappear together into this gallery. My reputation will survive a broken courtship. I will ensure that the blame falls on me, that you are seen as the sensible woman who rejected a madman's impulsive proposal. Your reputation may even improve. The wallflower who turned down a duke must have hidden depths." It was, Iris recognized, the right thing to say, the kind thing. He was giving her a genuine choice, not trapping her with the threat of ruin. And somehow, that kindness tipped the balance. "I have conditions," she heard herself say. The Duke's expression did not change, but something shifted in his posture, a release of tension she had not realized he was holding. "Name them." "I will not give up my spectacles. I do not care if they are unfashionable. I would not ask you to. I require a library, a good one, and the freedom to purchase whatever books I wish, without explanation or justification. Blackmore Hall has an extensive library. You may add to it as you see fit. I have a project, a private pursuit that I will not discuss with you, but which requires time and solitude. I must have the freedom to continue this work without interference." Something flickered in the Duke's eyes, curiosity. "Perhaps," but he merely nodded. "Your time will be your own." Iris took a deep breath. This was madness. This was the most reckless thing she had ever done in her cautious, careful life. But standing here in the dim gallery, facing a man who looked at her as though she mattered, she felt something stir in her chest that she had thought long dead. Hope. "Then I accept your proposal, Your Grace." She extended her hand. "I will marry you." The Duke took her hand, and for a moment neither of them moved. His fingers were warm through their gloves, his grip firm but not crushing. In the candlelight, his grey eyes seemed almost silver, and Iris had the strangest sense that she was looking at a man who was as terrified as she was, who had gambled everything on this moment and was not yet certain whether he had won or lost. "Thank you," he said, and his voice was rough. "You will not regret this, Miss Pemberton. I swear it." "I hope not, Your Grace, for both our sakes." He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her gloved knuckles. It was a formal gesture, correct in every particular, but something in the way he lingered just a heartbeat too long made Iris's breath catch. When he released her hand and stepped back, his mask was firmly in place once more. "We should return to the ballroom. I will make the announcement tonight strike while the scandal is fresh, as it were." "An announcement?" Iris's voice came out slightly strangled. "Tonight? Speed is essential. Victor Blackwell will move quickly once he realizes what I have done. We must be engaged before he can mount a counter-strategy." It made sense. It was logical. It was also completely terrifying. "Your Grace," Iris said, and was proud that her voice remained steady. "I do not even know your given name." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or something softer. "Sebastian," he said. "My name is Sebastian." "Sebastian." She tested the name on her tongue, feeling its weight. "And you must call me Iris." "Iris." He said it slowly, as though tasting each syllable. "It suits you. Unexpected color in a grey world." Before she could respond to this extraordinary statement, he offered his arm. "Shall we, Miss Pemberton? I believe we have a ballroom to scandalize." Iris took his arm, feeling the solid strength of him beneath the fine wool of his coat. As they walked back toward the light and noise of the ball, she had the dizzying sense that she was walking toward the edge of a cliff, and that she had just agreed to jump. The announcement, when it came, was received with precisely the shock Iris had anticipated. Sebastian had led her to the center of the ballroom, positioned her beside him with his hand covering hers in a gesture of unmistakable possession, and calmly informed 500 of London's most influential citizens that he had the honor of announcing his engagement to Miss Iris Pemberton, and that he expected congratulations. The silence lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then the whispers began a rising tide of shock, speculation and scandal that washed through the Harrington ballroom like a wave. Iris kept her chin high and her expression composed, drawing on years of practice in enduring social invisibility to survive this very different kind of attention. Her mother had fainted. Catherine was crying, whether from joy or horror. Iris could not determine. And Lady Portia Vane stood like a statue carved from ice, her beautiful face utterly blank, her sapphire eyes fixed on the Duke with an expression that promised retribution. Later, after the congratulations and the questions and the pointed looks, after Sebastian had danced with her twice more and delivered her back to her family with formal courtesy, Iris found herself alone in the Pemberton carriage, her mother and sisters having departed ahead in a flurry of hysterical planning. She removed her spectacles and pressed her fingers to her eyes, trying to make sense of the evening's events. She was engaged to the Duke of Blackmore. She was engaged to a man who had chosen her as a strategic move in a game she barely understood. She was engaged to a man who had looked at her with grey eyes that held secrets she could not fathom, who had called her extraordinary, who had kissed her hand with a tenderness that seemed at odds with his claims of emotional incapacity. The carriage rattled through dark London streets, and Iris allowed herself one moment of absolute honesty. She was not afraid of Sebastian Ashworth. She was afraid of herself, of the hope that had taken root in her chest, of the way her heart had raced when he said her name, of the growing suspicion that this marriage of convenience might become something far more dangerous. She was afraid that she might fall in love with her own husband, and she was quite certain that such a thing would be the greatest disaster of all. When the carriage arrived home and she climbed the stairs to her small bedchamber, Iris found that she could not sleep. Instead, she lit a candle, pulled her current manuscript from its hiding place beneath the floorboards, and stared at the words she had written just yesterday. Lady Blackwood had thought herself immune to passion, the page read. She had built walls around her heart so high and thick that no force on earth could breach them. But as she looked into the Earl's storm-grey eyes, she felt those walls tremble and wondered, for the first time, if protection and prison might be the same thing. Iris set down the pages and laughed softly at herself. She was living her own novel, and she had no idea how it would end. Across London, in his study at Ashworth House, Sebastian stood at the window and watched the first pale light of dawn creep across the sky. He had done it. He had committed himself to a path from which there was no turning back. Miss Iris Pemberton. No, Iris. He must remember to think of her as Iris, now would be his wife, his duchess, the mother of his children, the woman who would share his name and his home for the rest of their lives. She was not what he had expected. He had observed her for months, cataloguing her qualities with the same cold calculation he applied to all his decisions. Intelligence, discretion, lack of romantic illusions. She had seemed the perfect candidate for his purposes, a woman who would ask nothing of him, expect nothing from him, leave his frozen heart undisturbed. But when he had looked into her honey-brown eyes and seen the way she saw him, saw through him, to the broken thing beneath the armor, he had felt something shift, something dangerous. I see someone who is tired of his own armor, but has forgotten how to remove it. No one had ever said such a thing to him. No one had ever dared to look past the Ice Duke to the man who had once been capable of warmth, of love, of hope. That man had died 10 years ago, destroyed by betrayal and loss, and Sebastian had buried him so thoroughly that he had almost forgotten he had ever existed. But Iris Pemberton had seen him, and that, Sebastian thought grimly, was a complication he had not anticipated. He turned from the window and poured himself a brandy, considering his next moves. Victor Blackwell would respond to tonight's announcement with fury, and fury made men unpredictable. The engagement must proceed quickly, the wedding arranged before Victor could mount an effective counter-strategy. Within a fortnight, Sebastian estimated. 3 weeks at most, and then he would be married, to a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, to a woman who had accepted him knowing he was incapable of love, to a woman who did not know that he had lied. Sebastian set down his glass and pressed his hands against the cold marble of the mantelpiece. He had told Iris that his capacity for love had been destroyed. He had believed it himself, for years. The wound left by Eleanor's betrayal, by Thomas's death, by his father's final disappointed face, those wounds had calcified into something hard and unfeeling, and Sebastian had welcomed the numbness. Numbness was safe. Numbness could not be hurt. But watching Iris tonight, watching her wit and courage, and the fire she kept hidden beneath her wallflower mask, Sebastian had felt something stir in that frozen place. Something that felt dangerously like hope. He crushed it ruthlessly. He would marry Iris Pemberton. He would protect her from the consequences of his enemy's machinations. He would give her security and position and freedom, exactly as he had promised. But he would not love her. He would not allow himself to need her. He would not make himself vulnerable again. Some walls, once built, must never come down. As dawn broke over London and society buzzed with the scandal of the season, the Duke of Blackmore sat alone in his study and told himself that he was still in control. But somewhere deep beneath his armor, in a heart he had believed long dead, something had begun to beat. The wedding took place 11 days after the Harrington ball, in a small chapel on the grounds of Blackmore Hall, with only immediate family and the necessary witnesses present. Iris wore ivory silk and her mother's pearls, and she spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice that betrayed nothing of the terror coursing through her veins. Sebastian's voice was equally steady, equally calm. They might have been conducting a business transaction, rather than binding themselves together for eternity, which, Iris supposed, was precisely what they were doing. The wedding breakfast was brief and subdued. Iris's mother wept throughout, though whether from joy at her Wallflower daughter's spectacular match, or grief at losing her to a man with such a fearsome reputation, Iris could not determine. Catherine and Eleanor offered congratulations that seemed genuine, if bewildered. Her brother Edward did not attend, having sent word that urgent business detained him in London, urgent business that Iris suspected involved cards, dice, and significant quantities of brandy. By mid-afternoon, the guests had departed, and Iris found herself alone with her husband in the great entrance hall of Blackmore Hall. Her husband. The words felt foreign, impossible. The Duke of Blackmore Sebastian stood beside her in his immaculate wedding clothes, his grey eyes unreadable, his beautiful face revealing nothing of his thoughts. They had barely spoken since the ceremony. What did one say to a stranger one had just married? "I will show you to your rooms," Sebastian said, breaking the silence. "Mrs. Hartley, the housekeeper, will attend you. She can answer any questions about the household." "Thank you." Iris's voice came out smaller than she intended. She cleared her throat and tried again. "That would be most helpful." He offered his arm, and she took it, hyper-aware of the solid warmth of him beneath the fine wool of his coat. Together they ascended the grand staircase, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Blackmore Hall was magnificent and intimidating in equal measure. The architecture spoke of centuries of wealth and power, of generations of Ashworths who had shaped this place in their image. Portraits lined the walls, stern-faced men and elegant women, all watching Iris with painted eyes that seemed to judge her an interloper. "The family wing is this way," Sebastian said, guiding her down a corridor. "Your suite is connected to mine through a sitting room. You may arrange the rooms however you wish. If the furnishings are not to your taste, inform Mrs. Hartley, and she will see to changes. I'm sure they will be perfectly adequate." Sebastian stopped before a door and turned to face her. "Iris." It was the first time he had used her given name since their engagement, and something in his voice made her look up sharply. "I know this is not the wedding you imagined," he said quietly. "I know I have asked a great deal of you. I want you to understand that I meant what I said about your freedom. This is your home now. You may do as you please within it. I will make no demands on your time or your company." "And the other demands?" Iris felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she refused to look away. "You mentioned an heir." Sebastian's expression flickered something that might have been discomfort, or perhaps something else entirely. "That matter can wait until you are settled. There is no urgency." "I understood there was considerable urgency. Victor Blackwell." "Victor Blackwell's machinations do not dictate the terms of our marriage bed." Sebastian's voice was sharper than she had heard it before. "I will not come to you until you are ready. If you are never ready, then we will address the question of succession through other means. Is that clear?" Iris stared at him, trying to reconcile this consideration with his reputation for coldness. "Abundantly." "Good." He stepped back, his mask settling into place once more. "Mrs. Hartley will be up shortly. I have business to attend to in my study. Dinner is at 8. We can take it separately if you prefer." "I do not prefer." The words escaped before Iris could consider them. "That is, we are married, Your Grace. We might as well become accustomed to each other's company." Something flickered in Sebastian's grey eyes. "As you wish. 8 o'clock, then. The dining room is— I will find it." Iris lifted her chin. "I am quite capable of navigating a house, however large." "I never doubted it." Was that amusement in his voice? It was gone before she could be certain. "Until dinner, then. Duchess." He turned and walked away, leaving Iris alone in the corridor with her racing heart and her complete bewilderment. Duchess. She was a duchess now. The thought was so absurd that she laughed aloud, the sound echoing strangely in the empty hallway. Iris Pemberton, Wallflower of 7 seasons, was now her Grace, the Duchess of Blackmore. Her publisher would never believe it. The rooms were beautiful. Iris had expected cold grandeur, something befitting a house called Blackmore Hall and a man called the Ice Duke. Instead, she found warmth and elegance, soft blue walls, cream-coloured furnishings, windows that looked out over gardens just beginning to show signs of spring. A fire burned in the grate, chasing away the April chill, and fresh flowers adorned the mantelpiece. Someone had gone to considerable effort to make these rooms welcoming. Mrs. Hartley, a comfortable woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands, supervised the unpacking of Iris's trunks while explaining the workings of the household. The staff was extensive but well-trained. The cook was temperamental but talented. The gardens were the particular pride of the head gardener, Mr. Collins, who could be found there from dawn to dusk regardless of weather. "And His Grace?" Iris asked, keeping her voice casual. "What are his particular habits?" Mrs. Hartley's expression softened. "His Grace keeps to himself, Your Grace. Takes his breakfast early, spends most days in his study or riding the estate. He's a fair master, though never harsh with the staff, always reasonable in his expectations. We've been hoping—" She stopped herself. "Forgive me. It's not my place. Please go on. I find myself in considerable need of insight into my husband's character." The housekeeper hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "We've been hoping someone might bring a bit of warmth to this house. It's been cold too long, and I don't mean the fires, Your Grace. Since the old Duke passed, and young Master Thomas before him, His Grace carries a heavy burden, heavier than anyone knows." "You've been with the family long?" 30 years, Your Grace. I remember His Grace as a boy, bright and laughing, always getting into mischief with his brother." Mrs. Hartley's eyes grew distant. "He was different then, before everything happened." Iris wanted to press for details, but something held her back. Sebastian's wounds were his own. She would not learn his secrets from servants' gossip. "Thank you, Mrs. Hartley. I believe I should like to rest before dinner." "Of course, Your Grace. Ring if you need anything at all." Alone at last, Iris sank into a chair by the fire and tried to gather her scattered thoughts. She was married to a man she barely knew. She was living in a house full of strangers. She was supposed to somehow navigate a role she had never expected to play: duchess, wife, potential mother. And somewhere in the back of her mind, beneath the fear and confusion, was a persistent whisper of something that felt dangerously like anticipation. The connecting sitting room, she discovered during her explorations, led to Sebastian's chambers. His door was closed, but Iris paused before it, aware of a strange tension in her chest. Behind that door was the man she would share her life with, the man who would eventually share her bed, the man whose grey eyes saw more than she wanted to reveal. She retreated to her own rooms and pulled her writing case from among her unpacked belongings. Whatever else changed, she would not give up her novels. She would not abandon the one part of herself that had always been truly hers. Opening to a fresh page, she began to write. Dinner was a strange affair. The dining room was enormous, designed to seat 40 guests in comfort, and the sight of just 2 place settings at one end of the vast table struck Iris as faintly ridiculous. Sebastian stood when she entered, his eyes sweeping over her simple evening dress with an expression she could not read. "You look well," he said. "The rooms are satisfactory?" "More than satisfactory. They're beautiful, actually. Thank you." He pulled out her chair himself, waving away the footman who stepped forward to assist. "The previous Duchess, my mother, decorated them. She had excellent taste. You speak of her in the past tense. She died when I was 12, a fever that swept through the county one winter." Sebastian took his own seat across from her. "My father never recovered from the loss. He loved her quite desperately. It was the most personal information he had volunteered since their engagement." Iris found herself leaning forward slightly, hungry for more. "And you? Do you remember her?" Something shifted in Sebastian's face, a softening, almost imperceptible. "I remember that she smelled of roses. that she laughed easily, that she used to read to Thomas and me before bed, doing different voices for all the characters. He paused. I remember that she made this house feel like a home. It must have been very difficult, losing her so young. Difficult. Sebastian's mouth curved in something that was not quite a smile. Yes, one might say that. Silence fell between them as the first course was served. Iris watched her husband covertly, trying to reconcile the cold reputation with the man who spoke so tenderly of his mother. There were depths here, she thought, depths he worked very hard to hide. "Tell me about your family," Sebastian said, breaking into her thoughts. "I confess I know little beyond the basics. A Viscount father, 2 elder sisters, a brother. My father died 3 years ago. My mother lives with my sister Eleanor and her husband. They are very kind to her. Catherine is married to the Earl of Westfield. They have 2 children and are disgustingly happy." Iris sipped her wine. Edward. He has expensive habits and little income. My father's estate was entailed, of course, and what little was not went to pay debts." "Your brother's debts?" Iris hesitated. Family loyalty warred with honesty, and honesty won. Among others, my father was not the most prudent manager of finances. By the time of his death, there was very little left. "And your dowry?" "Sufficient to prevent me from being entirely unmarriageable, but not enough to overcome my other deficiencies." Iris kept her voice light. "Red hair, spectacles, a sharp tongue, and a preference for books over ballrooms. Not exactly the makings of a diamond." Sebastian set down his fork and regarded her with disconcerting intensity. "You speak of yourself as though you were some sort of defective merchandise." "I speak of myself as society sees me. Society is composed largely of fools." Iris blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "Your hair is not red. It is the color of autumn leaves, and it is striking. Your spectacles indicate intelligence rather than deficiency. Your sharp tongue is refreshing in a world of simpering flattery. And your preference for books suggests a mind worth knowing." Sebastian's grey eyes held hers. "Society failed to recognize your worth. That is society's failure, not yours." Iris found herself temporarily unable to speak. No one had ever spoken to her like this, as though her supposed flaws were virtues, as though she were valuable rather than merely tolerable. "You are very kind," she managed finally. "I am not kind. I am accurate." Sebastian returned his attention to his plate. "You should eat. Mrs. Crawford becomes quite distressed when her cooking goes unapproved." They finished the meal in a silence that felt somehow different from before, less awkward, more companionable. When the dessert plates were cleared, Sebastian rose and offered his arm. "Would you care to see the library? I believe it might be of interest to you." Iris's heart leapt. "Very much." The library was everything she had hoped for, and more. 3 stories of books rose around her, accessible by a system of rolling ladders and narrow gallery walkways. The scent of leather and paper and old ink filled the air, and Iris felt something loosen in her chest that she had not realized was tight. "This is magnificent," she breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "How many volumes?" "Approximately 15,000, though I have not catalogued them in some years." Sebastian watched her reaction with something that might have been satisfaction. "My grandfather was the true collector. He never met a book he would not purchase." Iris moved to the nearest shelf and ran her fingers along the spines. History, philosophy, natural science, everything was here, organized with care and maintained with obvious love. "You read?" The question emerged before she could stop it, and she immediately felt foolish. "I mean, forgive me. Of course you read." "You meant, do I actually read, or do I merely own books for the appearance of intellect?" Sebastian's mouth curved. I read, perhaps not as voraciously as my grandfather, but enough to appreciate a well-crafted argument or a compelling narrative. Novels? On occasion, when I find one that does not insult my intelligence. Iris thought of her own novels, the Gothic romances she published under a male pseudonym, full of dark secrets and passionate encounters, and heroines who refused to be defeated by circumstance. Would they insult his intelligence? Would he dismiss them as frivolous feminine nonsense? She would never tell him. Never. "You may use this room whenever you wish," Sebastian continued. "Consider it yours as much as mine. If there are volumes you wish to acquire, inform me, and I will see to it." That is very generous. It is practical. A duchess should have access to whatever resources she requires. He paused, and something shifted in his expression. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "The project you mentioned, the private pursuit you would not discuss, is it something that requires particular materials, equipment, space?" Iris felt her face heat. "It requires only paper, ink, and solitude." "You write." It was not a question. Iris's heart hammered against her ribs. "What makes you say that?" "I told you I observed you before our engagement. You are always composing in your head. I can see your lips moving when you think no one is watching. You reach for a pencil that is not there when something interesting happens. You look at people as though you are describing them to someone who cannot see." Sebastian's grey eyes were intent on her face. "You write. The question is merely what?" Iris could deny it. She could dismiss his observations as fancy, claim that she merely kept a journal or wrote letters to friends. He would probably accept the explanation. He had no reason to press. But something in his gaze, curiosity without judgment, interest without condescension, made her want to tell the truth. "Novels," she said quietly. "I write novels." Sebastian's eyebrows rose. "Published?" "Yes, under a pseudonym. I. M. Ashworth." She laughed shakily. "Rather ironic now, given my married name." I. M. Ashworth. Sebastian was silent for a moment, and Iris watched his face, trying to read his reaction. The Gothic romances, The Shadow of Thornwood Manor, A Lady's Dark Secret. Iris stared at him. "You've read them?" "They were recommended to me by my aunt. She is an enthusiast of the genre." Something that looked almost like embarrassment crossed Sebastian's face. "I confess I found them surprisingly engaging." "You read my books?" "One of them. The one about the widow who inherits a haunted estate and discovers her late husband was not who he seemed." Sebastian's mouth curved. The characterization was particularly strong. The widow felt genuine, intelligent, but vulnerable, brave, but afraid. I believed her. Iris did not know whether to laugh or cry. Of all the improbable things that had happened in the past fortnight, her husband casually revealing that he had read and approved of her novel might be the most improbable of all. "I am gratified to hear it," she said, and was proud that her voice remained steady. "Though I must ask you to keep this information confidential. My publisher believes I. M. Ashworth to be a reclusive gentleman. If my identity were revealed—" "Your secret is safe." Sebastian's voice was firm. "I have no interest in exposing you. If anything, I am impressed. It takes considerable courage to create art and offer it to the world for judgment." "It takes considerable financial necessity," Iris corrected. "My income from writing has been not insignificant. It has allowed me certain freedoms I would not otherwise have had." "And now? Now that you are married to a wealthy man?" "Now I write because I must. Because the stories demand to be told. Because when I am not writing, I am thinking about writing. And when I am thinking about writing, I am not fully present in the world." Iris met his eyes. "It is an affliction, Your Grace. One I have no intention of curing." Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Sebastian, I beg your pardon? You called me Your Grace. I believe we are past such formality, given that we are married and standing in my library discussing your secret identity as a successful novelist." Despite everything, Iris felt her lips twitch. "Very well, Sebastian." He inclined his head. "Better. Now, shall I show you where the fiction is shelved? I believe there is an entire section devoted to Gothic romance, thanks to my aunt's influence." "That would be most welcome." They spent the next hour exploring the library together, Sebastian pointing out particular treasures, while Iris exclaimed over volumes she had only heard of and never thought to hold. It was, she realized with some surprise, the most comfortable she had felt since arriving at Blackmore Hall, perhaps even since accepting his proposal. When they finally parted at the door to her rooms, Sebastian took her hand and raised it to his lips. "Thank you for your company this evening. It was unexpectedly pleasant. Unexpected for you, or for me? Both, I suspect." His grey eyes held hers. "Good night, Iris. Sleep well." "Good night, Sebastian." She closed the door behind her and pressed her back against it, her heart racing for reasons she did not want to examine too closely. This was a marriage of convenience, a practical arrangement between two people who expected nothing from each other. She would do well to remember that. The weeks that followed established a rhythm that Iris had not anticipated. She had expected cold politeness, separate lives, two strangers sharing a roof, but nothing else. Instead, she found herself drawn into Sebastian's orbit in ways both large and small. They took breakfast together each morning, discussing the day's plans over coffee and toast. Sebastian spoke of estate business tenant disputes, crop rotations, repairs to cottages with a passion that surprised her. He cared about Blackmore, about the people who depended on him, in ways that contradicted his reputation for cold detachment. They took dinner together each evening, and those meals grew longer as the days passed. Conversation ranged from politics to philosophy to literature. They argued about the merits of various poets. Sebastian preferred the classics. Iris championed the romantics. They debated the proper role of government in alleviating poverty. They discussed her novels he had read 2 more by now, with a frankness that both thrilled and terrified her. "Your villain in the most recent one," Sebastian said over roast lamb one evening. "Lord Blackwood. He is too obviously evil from the start." "He is meant to be obviously evil. That is the point of Gothic villains." "But would it not be more interesting if the reader were uncertain? If they wondered whether he might be redeemable, might have reasons for his behavior, might prove to be something other than what he seems?" Iris considered this. "You are suggesting moral ambiguity. I am suggesting complexity. Your heroines are wonderfully complex, full of contradictions and surprises. Why should your villains not receive the same treatment?" It was a fair criticism, and Iris found herself turning it over in her mind for days afterward. Sebastian had a sharp eye for story, a sophisticated understanding of character. He would have made a formidable editor. He would have made a formidable many things, she thought, if he had not locked himself away behind walls of ice. But the walls were showing cracks. She saw it in the way his eyes warmed when she made him laugh, a rare occurrence, but increasingly less rare. She saw it in the gentle manner he used with his elderly aunt, Lady Ashworth, who visited for a fortnight and immediately declared Iris exactly what the boy needs. She saw it in the hours he spent in the conservatory, tending to his orchids with a care that bordered on tenderness. Most of all, she saw it in the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching. There was hunger in those grey eyes, longing, a need that he ruthlessly suppressed but could not entirely hide. He wanted her, and heaven help her, She wanted him too. "You should tell him," Lady Ashworth said one afternoon when she and Iris were taking tea in the morning room. "Whatever it is you're hiding, and do not insult me by denying you are hiding something, you should tell Sebastian the truth." "I don't know what you mean." The old woman's eyes, still sharp despite her 73 years, fixed on Iris with uncomfortable perception. "You spend hours alone in your rooms each day. You emerge looking satisfied but tired, as though you have been engaged in demanding work. You speak of books with a passion that suggests more than a reader's appreciation." She set down her teacup. "You are a writer, are you not?" Iris felt the blood drain from her face. "How did you—" "I am old, my dear, not stupid, and I have spent a lifetime observing people." Lady Ashworth's expression softened. "I read those novels, you know, the ones by I.M. Ashworth. Quite good, though I suspect you could do even better if you stopped censoring yourself." "You knew?" "I suspected, after Sebastian announced his engagement to a wallflower named Pemberton. I.M. Ashworth's heroines have always struck me as women who understand what it is to be overlooked." She smiled. "When I met you, my suspicions were confirmed. You have writer's eyes, my dear. You see everything." Iris did not know what to say. Her secret, so carefully guarded for years, seemed to be unraveling at an alarming rate. "Sebastian knows," she said finally. "He discovered it shortly after we married." "Good. Secrets poison marriages." Lady Ashworth reached out and took Iris's hand. "You are good for him, you know. Better than he realizes. I have not seen my nephew this present in a decade. He is engaging with life again, instead of merely enduring it. I have done nothing special. You have seen him. The real Sebastian, not the ice duke that society invented to explain what they could not understand." The old woman's grip tightened. "He loved deeply once, my nephew. And when that love was betrayed, he decided he would never love again. But the heart is not so easily controlled, whatever he might believe. He told me he was incapable of love. He told himself that, long before he told you. It was easier than facing the risk of being hurt again." Lady Ashworth released her hand and sat back. "The question is whether you will have the courage to reach him, to refuse to accept the walls he has built, to love him anyway, knowing he may never admit to loving you in return." Iris stared at her. "I don't, that is not, we have a practical arrangement." "Oh, my dear." Lady Ashworth's smile was sad and knowing. "You are already in love with him. I can see it every time you look at him. The question is what you intend to do about it." That night, Iris could not sleep. She lay in her elegant bed, staring at the canopy above her, Lady Ashworth's words echoing in her mind. "You are already in love with him." Was she? She thought of Sebastian's rare smiles, offered like gifts, of his hands among the orchids, gentle and sure, of his voice discussing her novels, sharp and challenging, and more engaged than any critic she had ever encountered, of the way he listened to her, really listened, as though her thoughts mattered, as though she mattered. She thought of the hunger in his grey eyes, the need he refused to acknowledge. She thought of what it might feel like to be held by him, kissed by him, loved by him. We have a practical arrangement, but nothing about this felt practical anymore. A noise from the connecting sitting room made her freeze. Soft footsteps, the creak of a floorboard, then silence. Iris rose and pulled on her wrapper, moving quietly to the door. She pressed her ear against the wood, straining to hear. Nothing. She opened the door. Sebastian stood in the middle of the sitting room, dressed in a brocade dressing gown, his hair slightly dishevelled. He looked startled to see her, almost guilty. "I apologize," he said quickly. "I did not mean to disturb you. I was simply—" He trailed off, apparently unable to find a suitable explanation for lurking in the sitting room at midnight. "You were simply what?" Sebastian's jaw tightened. "I could not sleep. I thought I might check that you were comfortable. By standing outside my door in the dark? It sounds considerably less reasonable when you say it aloud." Despite herself, Iris felt her lips twitch. "Come in, then. If you are going to lurk, you might as well do so where there is adequate seating." Sebastian hesitated, clearly uncertain whether this was wise. Then he stepped through the doorway into her bedchamber. The room felt different with him in it, smaller, more charged. Iris was acutely aware that she wore only her nightgown and wrapper, that her hair hung loose down her back, that they had never been alone together in circumstances quite like these. "Your aunt believes we should consummate the marriage," she heard herself say. Sebastian went very still. She said that? Not in those precise words, but she implied that secrets poison marriages, and this particular secret, the fact that we remain essentially strangers despite sharing a name, seems relevant to her concerns. "Iris, I am not asking you to love me." Her voice was steady, but her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he must hear it. "I understand that you cannot or will not offer that. But we spoke of practicalities when we made our arrangement. An heir, a true marriage. If we are to build any kind of life together, should we not begin as we mean to go on?" Sebastian crossed the room in 3 strides. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, could see the rapid pulse at the base of his throat. "You do not know what you are asking," he said, his voice rough. "Then tell me." "I am not—" He stopped, his hands clenching at his sides. "I have not been intimate with anyone in years. I have not wanted to be. The arrangement with Portia was never physical. It was pure convenience, nothing more. I had convinced myself that part of me was dead. And now?" His grey eyes burned into hers. "Now I find myself thinking of you constantly. Your voice, your laugh. The way you look at me, as though you see past everything I have built to protect myself. I lie awake at night wanting things I had sworn I would never want again, and I do not know what to do with that wanting." "Perhaps," Iris said softly, "you could start by kissing me." For a long moment, Sebastian did not move. Iris could see the war playing out behind his eyes, desire battling caution, need wrestling with fear. Then his hands came up to cup her face, and his mouth descended on hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost questioning, as though he expected her to push him away. When she did not, when she leaned into him instead, her hands finding his shoulders, her body pressing against the solid warmth of his, something shifted. The kiss deepened, grew hungry, and Iris felt herself drowning in sensations she had only ever imagined. His hands tangled in her hair. His body pressed her backward until she felt the edge of the bed against her legs. His mouth left hers to trace a burning path along her jaw, her throat, the sensitive place where her neck met her shoulder. "Iris." Her name was a groan against her skin. "Tell me to stop. Tell me this is too fast, too soon. Don't stop." She pulled him closer, her fingers gripping the silk of his dressing gown. "Sebastian, please don't stop." He lifted his head, his grey eyes searching hers. Whatever he saw there seemed to decide him. "Then God help us both," he murmured, and lowered her to the bed. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight, Iris's head on Sebastian's chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "I did not expect that," he said quietly. "Which part?" "Any of it." His hand stilled on her skin. "I told you I was incapable of love. I believed it. But what I feel when I am with you—" He trailed off, seeming to search for words. "It does not feel like incapacity." Iris propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. In the silver light, His features were softer. The harsh planes of his face relaxed in a way she had never seen. He looked younger, more vulnerable. "What does it feel like?" "Like terror," he said honestly. "Like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that if I jump, I will either fly or fall to my death, and having no way to predict which." "That is hardly a romantic declaration." "I am not a romantic man." But his hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, and the gesture was tender in a way that contradicted his words. "I am a man who has built walls for a decade and is discovering that they were never as strong as he believed." Iris leaned down and kissed him softly. "Then perhaps we can dismantle them together, brick by brick." Something shifted in his expression. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of something more. "Perhaps we can." They made love again as dawn began to lighten the sky, and this time there was less urgency, more exploration, as though they were learning each other's language. When they finally slept, it was wrapped around each other, and Iris's last thought before consciousness faded was that she had never felt so completely, terrifyingly alive. The idyll lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of shared breakfasts and longer dinners. 3 weeks of nights that left Iris breathless and dazed. 3 weeks during which Sebastian's walls came down brick by brick, revealing the man beneath passionate, intelligent, unexpectedly tender. 3 weeks during which Iris fell completely, irrevocably in love with her husband. And then Portia Vane arrived at Blackmore Hall. Iris was in the library when she heard the commotion-raised voices in the entrance hall, the housekeeper's firm tones mingling with a woman's imperious demands. She set down her pen and moved to the doorway, drawn by a growing sense of dread. Lady Vane stood in the centre of the hall, magnificent in a travelling costume of deep crimson, her beautiful face twisted with fury. Sebastian had emerged from his study and was facing her with an expression that had gone cold and closed. "You cannot simply refuse to see me," Portia was saying. "After everything we have been to each other, we have been nothing to each other." Sebastian's voice was flat. "We had an arrangement of mutual convenience, which I have ended. There is nothing more to discuss." "Nothing more? You humiliated me in front of all of London. You cast me aside for a nobody, a wallflower with red hair and spectacles. You will not speak of my wife in that manner." The temperature of Sebastian's voice dropped several degrees. "Whatever our history, Portia, it does not give you the right to insult the Duchess of Blackmore." Portia's laugh was brittle. "The Duchess of Blackmore? Do you think she knows why you really married her? Do you think she understands that she was nothing but a strategic maneuver?" "She understands perfectly. I was honest with her from the beginning." "Oh, were you? Did you tell her about Eleanor? Did you tell her what you did to your own brother?" The silence that followed was absolute. Iris found herself stepping forward into the hall, drawn by a need to understand what was happening. Sebastian saw her, and something in his face changed, a flash of something that looked almost like fear. "Iris. Ah, the little Duchess appears." Portia turned, and her smile was sharp as a blade. "How delightful. Tell me, Your Grace, has your husband shared the details of his past with you? The real details, not the sanitized version society pretends to believe?" "What happens between my husband and myself is none of your concern." "But it is, you see, because my brother Victor is very concerned with Sebastian's happiness, or rather, his lack thereof." Portia moved closer, her eyes glittering. "Did Sebastian tell you about Eleanor Blackwood, the beautiful debutante he was engaged to once upon a time? He mentioned an engagement that ended badly." "Ended badly." Portia's laugh was a weapon. "Is that what he called it? Let me tell you the truth, little Duchess. Eleanor Blackwood came to London with nothing but a pretty face and a talent for manipulation. She set her cap at Sebastian, seduced him utterly, made him believe she loved him desperately. And all the while, she was also seducing his younger brother Thomas. Iris's stomach turned. That is the truth. Eleanor played the brothers against each other, stoking jealousy and suspicion, until Thomas challenged Sebastian to a duel over her honor. Sebastian refused to fight his own brother. Of course, he could never have lived with himself if he had. So Thomas went out drinking instead, got into an altercation at a gaming hell, and was killed by a stranger over a card game. Sebastian had gone white. Portia, that is enough. Oh, but I am just getting to the best part. Portia's voice dripped with mock sympathy. Eleanor fled with the family jewels while the household was distracted by Thomas's death. The shock of losing his heir and his second son's betrayal killed the old duke within the month. And Sebastian... She turned to look at him with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. Sebastian has blamed himself ever since, for not seeing Eleanor's true nature, for not protecting his brother, for surviving when everyone else died. I said that is enough. Sebastian's voice cracked like a whip. Is it? Because I think your wife deserves to know who she married. A man so damaged by one woman's betrayal that he has spent a decade punishing himself and everyone around him. A man who chose you, little Duchess, because he knew you would never reach his heart. Because he looked at you and saw someone he could keep at a distance forever. Iris felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She looked at Sebastian, searching his face for denial, for explanation, for something. He gave her nothing. His expression was closed, his grey eyes shuttered, all the warmth of the past 3 weeks stripped away as though it had never existed. "Is that true?" she whispered. "Is that why you chose me?" Sebastian said nothing. Portia laughed softly. "I see I have overstayed my welcome. Do give my regards to Victor, Sebastian. He will be so pleased to learn how things are progressing." She swept toward the door, pausing to deliver one final barb. "Oh, and your grace? I should be careful about any news you might be inclined to share with your husband. Men like Sebastian do not handle vulnerability well. It tends to make them retreat." The door closed behind her, and silence descended. Iris stared at Sebastian across the vast expanse of the entrance hall. He looked like a stranger, cold, closed, unreachable. The man who had held her through the night, who had whispered her name like a prayer, who had begun to let her see behind his walls that man had vanished as though he had never existed. "Sebastian, I need to speak with my solicitor." His voice was perfectly controlled. "This situation with Victor Blackwell requires attention. I may be gone several days. Sebastian, please. I suggest you use the time to consider your position, whether you wish to remain in a marriage that was, as Portia so accurately stated, a strategic maneuver." He turned away. "I will send word when I return." "Stop." The word came out sharper than Iris intended, and Sebastian froze mid-step. "Do not do this. Do not retreat behind your walls because Portia Vane said cruel things designed to hurt us both." She told the truth. She told a truth, twisted to serve her purposes. That is not the same thing. Iris crossed the hall until she stood directly behind him. "I knew you chose me for strategic reasons. You were honest about that from the beginning. What I did not know, what I am only now beginning to understand, is how deeply you were wounded, and how hard you have worked to ensure you would never be wounded again." Sebastian turned slowly to face her. His grey eyes were bleak. "You do not know what you are saying." "Then explain it to me. Tell me about Eleanor. Tell me about Thomas. Tell me what happened to make you believe you were incapable of love." "It does not matter. It matters to me." Iris reached out and took his hand, feeling the tension in his fingers, the way he was poised to pull away. I am your wife, Sebastian. Whatever you are running from, you do not have to run alone. For a moment, just a moment, she saw something crack in his expression. Pain, longing, desperate hope. Then the walls slammed back into place. You should not have married me. His voice was rough. I tried to tell you, I tried to warn you. Warn me of what? That I destroy everything I touch. He pulled his hand free. Eleanor saw something in me that was worth having, and I failed to protect her from my brother's jealousy. Thomas loved me, and I failed to save him from his own recklessness. My father trusted me to hold the family together, and I watched it shatter around me. His jaw clenched. I told you I was incapable of love. What I should have said was that I am incapable of loving without destroying. That is not true. It is true. Sebastian's voice rose. It has always been true. And these past weeks letting myself believe that perhaps this time might be different, that was the greatest cruelty of all. Not to you, but to myself. Iris felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You are a fool, Sebastian Ashworth. He blinked. I beg your pardon? A fool. You have convinced yourself that love is dangerous because you were betrayed by a manipulative woman who never deserved you. You have spent a decade punishing yourself for failures that were never your fault. And now, when something real is finally within your grasp, you are running away because running is easier than risking. You do not understand. I understand perfectly. Iris's voice was steady now, fierce. I understand that you are terrified. I understand that letting yourself love me feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. I understand that every instinct you have is screaming at you to retreat, to protect yourself, to rebuild the walls I have spent weeks helping you dismantle. She stepped closer, holding his gaze. What I do not understand, what I refuse to accept, is the idea that you are incapable of love. Because I have felt you love me, Sebastian. In the way you touch me, in the way you listen when I speak, in the way you look at me when you think I cannot see. You love me already. You are simply too afraid to admit it. Sebastian stared at her, as though she had struck him. Tell me I am wrong, Iris said quietly. Look me in the eye, and tell me you feel nothing for me. Tell me these past weeks meant nothing. Tell me I am just a strategic maneuver, a convenient duchess, a means to an end. If you can say that honestly, I will never speak of this again. The silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Sebastian opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I cannot, he said finally, and his voice broke on the words. God help me, Iris. I cannot. Then stop running. She reached for him again, and this time he did not pull away. Stay. Fight. Let me love you, even if you cannot say the words back. I am not Eleanor, Sebastian. I will not betray you. I will not break you. I am asking only for a chance to prove that love does not have to mean destruction. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against him, and his face buried in her hair. I do not deserve you, he whispered. Let me be the judge of that. They stood there in the entrance hall, holding each other as the afternoon light slanted through the windows. It was not a resolution. It was not a promise of happily ever after. But it was something, a beginning, a choice to stay rather than flee. And for now, Iris thought, that was enough. But 3 days later, everything shattered. It began with a letter. Iris was in the library, working on her latest manuscript, when the footman brought the post. Among the correspondence was a letter from her publisher, Mr. Hartwell, marked urgent. She opened it with a growing sense of unease. Dear Mr. Ashworth, the letter began, for Hartwell still believed he was corresponding with a male author. It is with deep regret that I must inform you of a most unfortunate circumstance. Through an error in our offices, your identity has been inadvertently revealed to a member of the press. I have made every effort to contain the situation, but I fear that by the time this letter reaches you, news of your authorship may already be spreading through society. Iris read the letter 3 times, her hands growing steadily colder with each reading. Her secret was out. Society would know that the Duchess of Blackmore wrote Gothic romances, sensational novels full of passion and darkness, and heroines who defied convention. The scandal would be enormous, the gossip merciless. She found Sebastian in his study, staring out the window at the rain that had begun to fall. When she entered, he turned, and his expression shifted when he saw her face. "What has happened?" Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. She watched him read it, watched his face change, waited for the storm that must surely follow the anger, the recrimination, the demand to know why she had kept such a dangerous secret. Instead, Sebastian set down the letter and looked at her with something she did not expect. Concern. "Are you all right?" "I what?" "The exposure of your work, the potential scandal. Are you all right?" Iris stared at him. "You are not angry." "Why would I be angry?" "Because I hid this from you. Because my foolish hobby is about to become a source of public mockery. Because the Duchess of Blackmore writing Gothic romances will make us both laughingstocks." "Stop." Sebastian crossed to her and took her hands in his. "Listen to me. Your writing is not a foolish hobby. It is a genuine talent. Your novels are beautiful and compelling and far more honest than anything society produces. If people choose to mock you for creating art, that reflects poorly on them, not on you. But the scandal will pass. Scandals always do." His grey eyes held hers. "What concerns me is that you felt you had to hide this, that you did not trust me enough to share the truth." The accusation struck home. "I was afraid." "Of what?" "That you would think less of me. That you would dismiss my work as frivolous or inappropriate. That you would—" She stopped, struggling to articulate fears she had never fully examined. "I have hidden my writing for so long. It was the one thing that was truly mine, that no one could take from me or judge. Sharing it felt like standing naked before the world." Sebastian was quiet for a moment. Then, "You shared it with me. Weeks ago, in this very house, you told me the truth about your work. You trusted me with your secret." "Yes, but you did not trust me enough to share the fear that came with it, the vulnerability, the risk." His voice hardened. "You accused me of hiding behind walls, Iris, of retreating when things become difficult. But you have walls of your own, your invisibility. Your certainty that you are not worthy of being seen. That is different. Is it? You convinced yourself that you were a wallflower because it was safer than risking rejection. You hid your brilliance because it was easier than facing judgment. You married a man who promised never to love you because a loveless marriage felt less dangerous than a real one." Iris flinched. "That is unfair." "It is true." Sebastian released her hands and stepped back. "We are more alike than either of us realized. Both hiding, both afraid, both convinced that the safest path is the one that asks nothing of our hearts." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. "What are you saying?" Iris whispered. "I am saying that we have a choice to make. We can continue as we have been circling each other, approaching and retreating, too afraid to truly commit. Or we can decide that the risk is worth taking." His grey eyes searched her face. "I cannot make that choice for you, Iris. I can only tell you that I have made mine." "And what have you chosen?" Sebastian moved toward her, closing the distance between them. He cupped her face in his hands, tilting it up so she had no choice but to meet his gaze. "I have chosen you," he said quietly. "God help me, Iris. I have tried to resist this. I have told myself all the reasons why loving you is dangerous and foolish and certain to end in devastation. But I find I cannot do it anymore. I love you. Completely. Terrifyingly. Without reservation." Iris's heart stopped. "You love me?" "I love you. I love your sharp tongue and your sharper mind. I love the way you see the world, the way you put it into words. I love that you refuse to be diminished by society's expectations. I love that you challenged me when I retreated and refused to accept my walls as permanent." His voice cracked. "I love you, and I am terrified of what that means, and I am choosing to love you anyway." She kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss, not tentative or questioning. It was fierce and desperate, all the fear and hope and longing of the past weeks pouring out in a single moment. Sebastian's arms came around her, lifting her off her feet, and she wrapped herself around him as though she might never let go. "I love you too," she gasped against his mouth. "I love you, Sebastian. I have loved you for weeks. I was just too afraid to say it." "Then we are both fools." He kissed her again, deeper, more thorough. "Perfect fools who deserve each other." "Perfect fools," she agreed, laughing and crying at once. "Yes, exactly that." They stayed there for a long time, wrapped around each other in his study while the rain fell outside. And Iris thought that perhaps, just perhaps, the cliff was not as frightening as she had believed. Perhaps falling was not the same as flying. Perhaps love, despite all evidence to the contrary, might actually be worth the risk. And then she remembered the letter. Sebastian. She pulled back slightly. My identity. The scandal. What do we do? His expression shifted, turning thoughtful. We embrace it. I beg your pardon? Your writing is nothing to be ashamed of. If society wishes to make it a scandal, we will make it a triumph instead. A small smile curved his lips. I believe we should host a salon. Invite the literary set. Celebrate your work openly and dare anyone to suggest there is anything improper about a duchess with a talent for Gothic romance. Iris stared at him. You cannot be serious. I am entirely serious. Let them whisper if they wish. Let them mock and gossip and speculate. At the end of the day, you will still be the Duchess of Blackmore, and I will still be the man who loves you beyond reason, and your novels will still be brilliant. What else matters? The scandal could damage your reputation. My reputation was damaged a decade ago and has been frozen ever since. A little thaw might do it good. He kissed her forehead. Trust me, Iris. Let me do this for you. Let me show the world who you really are. She thought of all the years she had spent hiding. All the times she had convinced herself that invisibility was safety, that being overlooked was the same as being protected. She thought of what it might feel like to be seen, truly seen, not just by Sebastian, but by everyone. All right, she said quietly. Let us do it. Let us scandalize society together. Sebastian smiled a real smile, warm and unguarded, and pulled her close. Together, he agreed. Always. But even as they held each other, neither of them heard the sound of hoofbeats outside the window. Neither noticed the rider dismounting in the rain, bearing news that would shatter everything. Neither knew that Victor Blackwell had made his move. The rider brought a letter sealed with black wax. Sebastian took it from the butler's silver tray, his expression shifting as he recognized the handwriting. Iris watched from across the breakfast room, her cup of tea suspended halfway to her lips, a cold dread settling into her bones. What is it? Sebastian did not answer immediately. He broke the seal, unfolded the paper, and read in silence. As his eyes moved across the lines, Iris saw something happen to his face, a draining of colour, a tightening of the jaw, a flash of something that looked almost like despair, before his expression locked down into the cold mask she had hoped never to see again. "Sebastian?" He set the letter down on the table with precise, controlled movements. "Victor Blackwell has made his intentions clear. He intends to destroy me, and he has found the means to do so." "What means? What can he possibly—" "He has obtained evidence that I killed my brother." The words fell into the room like stones into still water. Iris set down her teacup, her hands suddenly unsteady. "That is absurd. You told me Thomas died in a gaming hell altercation. You were not even present." "I was not. But Victor has manufactured evidence to suggest otherwise. Witnesses who will swear they saw me that night. A letter, supposedly in my hand, threatening Thomas's life. Documents that place me at the scene of his death." Sebastian's voice was flat, emotionless. "The evidence is fabricated, but it is convincing. If he brings it before a magistrate, I will face trial. If I am convicted, I will hang." Iris rose from her chair, crossing to him, placing her hands on his shoulders. He was rigid beneath her touch, every muscle locked against the emotion she could feel seething beneath his control. "Then we will fight it. We will prove the evidence is false. We will—" "Victor has spent years preparing this. He has resources, connections, influence. The witnesses are beyond reproach, or at least they will appear so. The letter is a masterful forgery." Sebastian finally looked at her, and the bleakness in his grey eyes made her heart clench. "I have played chess with this man for months, believing I was winning. I was merely being allowed to believe so while he positioned his pieces for the final move." "What does he want?" "The letter states his terms quite clearly. I am to divorce you, publicly and scandalously, on grounds of your unsuitability as a duchess. I am to marry Portia within the month. I am to sign over controlling interest in the Blackmore estates to a trust Victor administers. In exchange, the evidence against me will be destroyed. And I will be permitted to live out my days as a puppet duke dancing to Victor Blackwell's tune." "And if you refuse?" "Then the evidence goes to the magistrate tomorrow morning. I will be arrested, tried, and almost certainly convicted. The Blackmore name will be destroyed. And you—" his voice caught, "you will be left a widow, your reputation in ruins, your future in ashes." Iris's mind raced, turning over possibilities, searching for weakness in Victor's strategy. There must be something, some flaw in his plan, some leverage we can use against him. There is nothing. I have spent the past hour searching my memory for anything that might serve. Victor has been too careful, too patient. He has anticipated every move I might make and closed every avenue of escape. Then we create a new avenue. Iris gripped his shoulders harder. "Sebastian, listen to me. You are not alone in this. We face this together. You said that word to me yesterday together. Did you mean it?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Of course I meant it." "Then trust me. Let me help. My mind works differently than yours. I spend my days constructing plots, anticipating twists, finding the hidden threads that connect seemingly unrelated events." She moved around the chair to face him directly. "Tell me everything. Every detail of your history with Victor. Every interaction you have ever had. Every person who might have information about his activities. Leave nothing out, however insignificant it might seem." Sebastian stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to talk. The story took hours to tell. They moved from the breakfast room to Sebastian's study, the morning light giving way to afternoon grey as the tale unfolded. Victor Blackwell had nursed his grievance for 15 years, ever since Sebastian had declined to offer for his sister Portia. What might have been simple disappointment in another man had festered into obsession. Victor had watched, waited, gathered information. He had cultivated contacts within Sebastian's household. The man of business whose embezzlement had first alerted Sebastian to the threat was merely the most recent of Victor's instruments. There had been others before him, servants who reported on Sebastian's movements, business associates who shared confidential details. A web of surveillance that had grown so gradually, Sebastian had never noticed it tightening around him. "He knows everything about me," Sebastian said quietly. "My routines, my finances, my weaknesses. He knows that I blame myself for Thomas's death. He knows that I have spent a decade building walls to protect myself from that guilt. He has been waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and my marriage to you provided exactly the provocation he needed." Iris was pacing now, her mind working furiously. "The witnesses. You said they were beyond reproach. Who are they?" "Two men, Charles Whitmore and Geoffrey Davies. Both respectable, both with no apparent connection to Victor." "No apparent connection. But there must be one. Victor is too careful to leave such crucial witnesses uncontrolled. We need to investigate them, find the thread that ties them to Victor's web." "How? I have no network of informants, no experience in this sort of intrigue." Iris stopped pacing and looked at him. "But I know someone who does." Sebastian's eyebrows rose. "You?" "My publisher, Mr. Hartwell, is not merely a purveyor of Gothic novels. In his younger days, he was a Bow Street runner. He maintains connections throughout London's underworld connections that might prove useful in uncovering inconvenient truths about seemingly respectable witnesses." She moved to Sebastian's desk, reaching for paper and pen. "I shall write to him immediately. If there is dirt to be found on Whitmore and Davies, Hartwell can find it." "You would involve yourself in this? Risk yourself in my defense?" Iris looked up from her writing. "You are my husband. Your fight is my fight. Did you imagine I would simply stand aside while Victor Blackwell destroys everything we have built?" Sebastian rose from his chair and crossed to her, taking the pen from her hand, setting it aside. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her eyes sting. "I do not deserve you," he murmured against her lips. "We have established that you are a poor judge of what you deserve." She kissed him back, briefly, fiercely. "Now let me write this letter. We have very little time." The next 3 days were the longest of Iris's life. Hartwell's response came with gratifying speed. The old runner had not lost his taste for investigation, and the challenge of uncovering a conspiracy among the respectable classes clearly appealed to him. He promised information within 48 hours and delivered in 36. What he found changed everything. Charles Whitmore, the first witness, had a gambling habit that had accumulated debts far beyond his means to pay. Those debts had been mysteriously discharged 6 months ago, around the time Victor Blackwell had acquired a majority stake in the club where Whitmore most frequently lost his money. Geoffrey Davies, the second witness, had a sister who had been caught in a compromising situation with a married man. The scandal should have destroyed the family. Instead, it had been quietly suppressed, and the married man in question was a known associate of Victor Blackwell. Both witnesses were compromised. Both could be pressured. Both might, under the right circumstances, be persuaded to recant their testimony. But the most damning information concerned the letter itself. Hartwell had connections among London's forgers. One did not spend years pursuing criminals without developing sources in the criminal world, and one of those connections had been approached months ago to create a document in Sebastian Ashworth's hand. The forger had declined, finding the commission too dangerous, but he remembered the details. He remembered the intermediary who had approached him, and he was willing to testify to what he knew. The intermediary was Victor Blackwell's personal secretary. "We have him," Iris said, spreading Hartwell's report across Sebastian's desk. Not just enough to cast doubt on his evidence, enough to expose the entire conspiracy. If we can get these witnesses to testify, if we can bring the forger forward, Victor Blackwell will be the one facing charges, not you. Sebastian studied the documents, his expression shifting from disbelief to hope to something that looked almost like awe. How did you in 3 days? I told you, my mind works differently, and I have resources you did not think to use. Iris allowed herself a small smile. Never underestimate a novelist, Sebastian. We spend our lives understanding how people work, what motivates them, where their weaknesses lie. Victor Blackwell may have been plotting for years, but he made the mistake of believing that his enemies would play by conventional rules. And you do not play by conventional rules. I write Gothic novels, my love. I specialize in turning conventional expectations on their heads. Sebastian pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against him. I love you, he said, his voice rough. I love you more than I have words to express. You have saved me, Iris. In every way it is possible to save a person. We are not saved yet. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. We have evidence, but we still need to act. Victor expects you to capitulate by the end of the week. He does not know that we have uncovered his plot. We need to use that advantage. What do you propose? Iris smiled, and it was not a gentle smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent years creating villains and knew exactly how to defeat them. I propose, she said, that we give Victor Blackwell exactly what he expects until we do not. The confrontation took place at Victor Blackwell's London townhouse 3 days later. Sebastian had sent word that he wished to discuss terms, that he was prepared to accept Victor's conditions in order to protect his family and his name. Victor, confident in his victory, had agreed to a private meeting. He had not expected Sebastian to bring his wife. What is she doing here? Victor demanded as they were shown into his study. He was a handsome man, in a cold way, sharp features, calculating eyes, the kind of presence that commanded attention without inspiring warmth. Iris could see the family resemblance to Portia in his dark hair and elegant bearing. The Duchess wished to be present for the negotiations, Sebastian said smoothly. As the terms affect her so directly, I thought it only fair. The terms require that she be divorced and publicly disgraced. I cannot imagine she welcomes that outcome. The Duchess has opinions on many subjects. Sebastian took a seat without being invited, the gesture deliberately provocative. I find her perspective often illuminating. Iris remained standing, positioning herself near the window where the light was strongest. She wanted Victor to see her clearly, wanted him to underestimate her, as so many had done before. Let us be direct, Victor said, settling behind his desk with the air of a man accustomed to controlling every situation. You have received my terms. Do you accept them? I have questions first, clarifications to ensure I understand exactly what you require. Very well. Ask. Sebastian proceeded to enumerate the terms in tedious detail, asking for specifics on each point, drawing out the conversation while Victor's impatience grew. Iris watched the older man carefully, noting the way his fingers drummed against the desk, the slight tension in his shoulders. He was eager to conclude this, eager to claim his victory, which meant he was not thinking as clearly as he should. One final question, Sebastian said, when Victor's patience was clearly wearing thin. The witnesses you intend to produce, Charles Whitmore and Geoffrey Davies, can you guarantee their testimony will hold up under examination? Something flickered in Victor's eyes, the first hint of unease. Their testimony is solid. They will say exactly what is required of them. Will they? Even when confronted with evidence of how their cooperation was obtained? Whitmore's gambling debts, for instance. Davies's sister's scandal. Sebastian's voice was mild, almost conversational. One might argue that witnesses so obviously compromised could hardly be considered reliable. The colour drained from Victor's face. How did you— And then there is the matter of the letter itself, the one supposedly written in my hand, threatening my brother's life. Sebastian reached into his coat and produced a folded document. I have here a sworn statement from a forger, a specialist in document fabrication, who was approached to create that letter. He declined the commission, but he remembers the intermediary quite clearly. Your personal secretary, I believe? A Mr. Thomas Crane? Victor rose from his chair, his composure finally cracking. This is you cannot— I can, and I have. Sebastian rose as well, and suddenly he seemed taller, more commanding, the Ice Duke in full intimidating force. Did you truly believe I would simply capitulate to blackmail, Victor? Did you think I would not fight back? You had no resources, no connections, no way to investigate. He had me. Iris stepped forward, and Victor's gaze snapped to her as though he had forgotten she was present. You dismissed me as a wallflower, Mr. Blackwell, a nobody, a convenient target for your schemes. But wallflowers observe things that others miss. We listen when no one thinks we are paying attention. We develop unexpected alliances with unexpected people. You— Victor's laugh was disbelieving, but his eyes were wild. You uncovered this? I write novels, Mr. Blackwell, stories about villains who believe themselves invincible, who construct elaborate plans to destroy their enemies, who never anticipate that the seemingly powerless might prove more resourceful than expected. Iris smiled. You provided excellent material. I may use you in my next book. Victor turned back to Sebastian, desperate now. Whatever you think you know, it changes nothing. The magistrate will believe my witnesses. The letter is convincing enough to— The magistrate will receive a full report of your conspiracy within the hour if you do not withdraw your threats immediately. Sebastian's voice was cold as winter. Your witnesses have already been approached. They are prepared to recant their testimony in exchange for immunity from prosecution. The forger is prepared to testify against your secretary, who will almost certainly implicate you to save himself. Your entire scheme is collapsing as we speak, Victor. The only question is whether you collapse with it. The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. What do you want? Victor asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I want you gone. Leave England. Take your sister with you if you wish. I understand the continent is pleasant this time of year. Remain abroad for the rest of your natural life, and we will not pursue prosecution. Sebastian moved closer, his grey eyes hard. But if you ever return, if you ever threaten my family again, I will destroy you utterly, not through schemes and stratagems, but through the full weight of the law and my considerable influence. Is that understood? Victor nodded, a single jerky movement. Then we are finished here. I expect confirmation of your departure within the week. Sebastian offered his arm to Iris, and together they walked out of Victor Blackwell's study, out of his house, into the cool evening air of London. They did not speak until they were safely in their carriage, the horses moving at a steady clip toward Ashworth House. Then Sebastian pulled Iris into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "We did it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We actually did it. We did." Iris pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her cheek. Together. Together. He kissed the top of her head. I cannot believe when I think of what might have happened. But it did not happen. Victor underestimated us. He assumed that the Ice Duke would behave as the Ice Duke always had alone, isolated, with no one to fight beside him. He did not account for me. No. Sebastian pulled back enough to look at her, his grey eyes soft with wonder. No, he did not. And thank God for that. The journey back to Blackmore Hall was quiet, peaceful, suffused with the particular contentment of a battle won. They stopped at inns along the way, sharing rooms without pretense, moving through the world as what they truly were, husband and wife, partners, lovers. On the final night before reaching home, as they lay tangled together in a comfortable bed at a coaching inn, Sebastian propped himself on one elbow and looked down at Iris with an expression she had never seen before. "What is it?" she asked, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "I was thinking about the ball, the Harrington ball, where I knelt before you. That was only 2 months ago. It feels like a lifetime." "It does." He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "I chose you for strategic reasons. You know that. I was looking for someone invisible, someone society would not expect, someone I could use as a shield against Victor's machinations." "I know. But what I did not realize, what I could not have anticipated, was that I would find everything I never knew I needed." His voice was low, intent. "You saw me, Iris, from the very first moment. You looked past the Ice Duke and saw the man beneath, and instead of being frightened or repulsed, you stayed. You challenged me. You refused to accept my walls as permanent. Someone had to. Yes, someone had to. And it was you." He kissed her, slow and deep. "I told you once that I chose you because you were invisible. I was wrong. I chose you because you were the only one who truly saw." Iris blinked back sudden tears. "Sebastian." "I love you," he said simply. "I have told you before, but I want you to understand what I mean by it. I love you, not despite the circumstances that brought us together, but in some strange way because of them. You showed me that love does not have to mean destruction, that vulnerability does not have to mean devastation, that the walls I built to protect myself were also keeping out everything that makes life worth living. I love you too." The words came easily now, naturally. "I love you, Sebastian Ashworth, and I am grateful every day that you knelt before a wallflower at a ball and changed both our lives forever." He gathered her close, and they lay together in the darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had fought for each other when fighting seemed impossible, who had discovered that love was not the weakness they had feared, but the greatest strength either of them had ever known. Spring gave way to summer, and summer to autumn, and Blackmore Hall transformed. It was not the physical changes. Though those were significant, Iris had brought warmth to the cold rooms, colour to the austere decor, life to the silent corridors. It was something less tangible but more profound. The house felt inhabited now in a way it had not for years. Laughter echoed through the halls. Conversation flowed at meals. The staff moved with lighter steps, smiling at each other, remarking on how different everything had become since the new Duchess arrived. Sebastian's transformation was equally remarkable. The Ice Duke was not gone. He could still summon that cold authority when circumstances required, but it was no longer his default state. He smiled easily now, laughed readily, touched his wife with casual affection that would have been unthinkable a year before. And then, in the first cold days of November, Iris told him she was pregnant. Sebastian's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He wept. Great, shuddering sobs that shook his entire body as he held her, as he processed the reality that they were going to be parents, that the family he had never allowed himself to imagine was becoming real. "I am terrified," he admitted afterward, when the tears had subsided and they sat together before the fire in their shared sitting room. "I do not know how to be a father. My own father was distant, preoccupied. After my mother died, he retreated into his grief. I do not want to repeat his mistakes." "You will not." Iris took his hand. "You are already not repeating them. You are present. You are engaged. You are not hiding from your emotions or from the people who love you. What if I fail? What if something happens to the child or to you? Then we will face it together. Whatever comes, we face it together. She squeezed his fingers. That is what we promised each other, is it not? Sebastian raised her hand to his lips. That is what we promised. The pregnancy was not easy. Iris suffered terrible nausea in the early months, followed by exhaustion that made even her beloved writing feel impossible. Sebastian hovered, anxious and solicitous, until she finally banished him to his study with firm instructions to stop treating her like spun glass. I am pregnant, not dying, she told him. Women have been doing this for millennia. I will manage. I know you will manage. I simply wish you did not have to manage so much. Then distract me, read to me, argue with me about literature. Be my husband, not my nursemaid. He took her words to heart. The remainder of her pregnancy was filled with companionship, reading aloud in the evenings, debating the merits of various authors, discussing her work in progress with the sharp, critical eye she had come to value. Sebastian had become her first reader, offering insights that improved every manuscript he touched. The baby came in early spring, on a night when rain lashed the windows and thunder rolled across the moors. It was a girl. Sebastian held his daughter for the first time, with an expression of such transcendent wonder that Iris burst into tears watching him. The Ice Duke, the man who had sworn himself incapable of love, cradled the tiny infant against his chest and wept without shame. "Aurora," he said softly. "We should call her Aurora, for the dawn." "Aurora," Iris smiled through her exhaustion. "Because I am the light that ended your long winter?" "Because you are the light that ended everything dark, and she is the proof that light can create more light." He looked up at her, grey eyes shining. "I love you, Iris. I love you more than words can express, more than I ever knew it was possible to love. I love you too. I have loved you since you knelt before me at that ball and asked me to dance." "No, you did not." His smile was tender. "You were terrified and confused and quite certain I was either mad or mocking you." "Perhaps. But I fell in love with you very shortly after. By the time we reached the library—" "Certainly." "The library?" Sebastian laughed softly. "We argued in the library." "We did. You were imperious and demanding and completely transparent in your attempt to use me for your own purposes. And somehow I looked at you and thought, this is the most interesting man I have ever met. This is someone worth knowing." Iris reached out to touch Aurora's tiny fingers. "I was right. You were right about everything. You saw through me when no one else could. You refused to accept my walls. You believed I was capable of love when I had convinced myself otherwise." Sebastian leaned down to kiss her. "You saved me, Iris. You and Aurora. You are everything." The years passed. Aurora was joined by two brothers, William, named for Sebastian's grandfather, and Thomas, named for the brother he had lost. The nursery was full of noise and chaos and laughter, and Sebastian presided over it all with the kind of devoted attention that would have astonished anyone who remembered the Ice Duke of old. Iris published 12 more novels, each one more successful than the last. She abandoned her pseudonym entirely, writing under her own name, becoming known throughout England as a literary figure of genuine significance. The scandal that had seemed so threatening had transformed into triumph the Duchess of Blackmore, celebrated author, patron of women writers, host of the most sought-after literary salon in London. But it was the quieter moments that mattered most. Sunday mornings, when the children invaded their parents' bed and Sebastian told them stories from his own childhood. Summer afternoons in the garden, watching Aurora chase her brothers through the roses while Iris worked on her manuscripts in the shade. Winter evenings by the fire, Sebastian reading aloud while the children dozed against their parents. 8 years after the Harrington ball, they returned to it. Aurora was old enough to attend now, barely, at 12, but Lady Harrington had specifically invited the Duke and Duchess's eldest daughter, and it seemed churlish to refuse. Aurora was nervous, adjusting her gown repeatedly, tugging at her gloves, casting anxious glances at her reflection. "What if no one talks to me?" she asked her mother as their carriage approached the Harrington house. "What if I say something foolish? What if I trip on my gown or spill something, or—" "Then you will recover gracefully and no one will remember it by morning," Iris said calmly. "Everyone makes mistakes at their first ball, darling. The secret is to pretend you meant to do whatever embarrassing thing you have done." "That is not helpful, Mother." Sebastian reached across to take his daughter's hand. "Aurora, listen to me. You are the daughter of a duke and a celebrated novelist. You are intelligent, kind, and far more capable than you realize. Whatever happens tonight, you will be fine." Aurora did not look convinced. The ball was everything Iris remembered: glittering, chaotic, overwhelming. She kept one eye on her daughter as Aurora navigated the unfamiliar social waters, wincing when the girl retreated to a corner to catch her breath after a particularly awkward conversation. A wallflower corner, Iris noted with a pang. She was about to go rescue her daughter when Sebastian touched her arm. "Let me." He crossed the ballroom with purpose, and Iris watched as he reached Aurora's corner as he spoke quietly to his daughter. Aurora's expression shifted from mortification to surprise to something that might have been hope. Iris could not hear the conversation, but she could guess at its content. And when Sebastian offered his hand to his daughter and led her to the dance floor, ignoring the murmurs of a crowd that had never seen the Duke of Blackmore dance with anyone but his wife, Iris felt tears prick her eyes. They returned to her side when the dance was finished, Aurora pink-cheeked and smiling. "Father told me about you," Aurora said, "about how you met. He said you were in a wallflower corner just like mine, and he knelt before you in front of everyone." "He did. He said the wallflower corner is not a place of shame. He said it is a place of potential, where extraordinary women wait to be discovered by those wise enough to truly see." Iris looked at her husband, her heart so full she could barely breathe. Sebastian smiled at her, the warm, unguarded smile that still made her pulse race after 8 years of marriage. "Your father is a wise man," she said softly. "I know." Aurora's smile was her father's smile, bright and transformative. "I think I want to dance again. Is that permitted?" "More than permitted. Encouraged." Aurora disappeared into the crowd, and Sebastian took Iris's hand in his. "Dance with me," he said. "We are not newlyweds anymore. We are old married people with 3 children. We are 2 people who love each other desperately. That has not changed." He drew her toward the dance floor. "I danced with you at this ball 8 years ago, in this very room. I would like to do so again." They took their place among the couples as the orchestra began to play. Iris looked up at her husband, at the grey eyes that had once been so cold and were now so warm, at the face that had once been so closed and now showed every emotion openly. "I love you," she said. "I love you too. More than I did 8 years ago. More than I did yesterday. More than I have words to express." Sebastian pulled her closer. "You are my dawn, Iris. My light. My everything." They danced together as the candles blazed above them, as the music swelled around them, as their daughter laughed somewhere in the crowd, and their lives stretched before them full of promise. The Duke of Blackmore and his unlikely Duchess, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ruins of their fears. The wallflower, who had believed herself invisible, and the frozen Duke, who had believed himself incapable of love. Together, they had proved themselves wrong about everything that mattered. And as the music faded, and Sebastian drew her close for one final tender kiss, Iris thought that this moment, this man, this life, was better than any novel she had ever written or ever could write. Some stories were simply too beautiful for fiction. Some stories could only be lived.